I think that the greater danger will be when agentic AI is really a daily part of our lives and we're trusting agents to make decisions. I was at this day recently, this CISO day related to the RSA conference in San Francisco, and I listened in on their sessions all day long. It was a privilege. And the worries that they articulated would freeze your blood.
Welcome to the Animals Podcast. I'm Ty Magnan, the CEO at Animals.
And I'm Tim Metz, the Director of Marketing and Innovation.
This season on the Animals Podcast, we're pulling back the corporate curtain to show you how the largest, most complex B2B SaaS teams actually get content out of the door. Hear from content leaders at some of the biggest names in SaaS sharing the systems they built, the battles they fought, and the lessons they've learned along the way.
Today, we're speaking with Stephanie Losee,
the former Director of Industry and Portfolio Marketing at Autodesk. Before Autodesk, Stephanie launched Dell's Tech Page One and spearheaded Politico's Focus. She's earned top industry awards from various institutions like the Content Marketing Institute. In this conversation, we're going to unpack Stephanie's transition from journalism into content marketing, a bit of a personal story, how she navigates enterprise dynamics, and her point of view on how AI disruption will impact the role of content marketers pretty quickly now. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Stephanie. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. We like to start with the same question for all of our guests. Our audience knows this, but what kind of content are you consuming these days?
All right, so I know that this will not distinguish me from anyone, that I am consuming rapidly AI content. But I can tell you something else, which is that I'm not just reading it. I'm going to a fair number of in-person events. I don't always get out, to go to in-person events, but I'm making an effort to do that now. I just went to TED AI. It's not a TEDx event. It's the AI events leading up to TED AI, the big conference in October. There were two panels of people who was the only unvarnished conversation I have heard yet. They said all the things, including articulating everyone's worst fears about AI and people running the joint. And there was a certain amount of shouting and cheering. And so that's what I'm finding. It's less the content on the web that I'm consuming than conversations in person, interactive ones.
About AI specifically?
Yeah, about AI. I feel like we almost can't miss a day. That's how urgent it is.
It's changing so quickly, right? And I also think we need to be having conversations right now because we're all trying to figure it out, right? And we all hold a few pieces of the puzzle and we're trying to, see the road ahead. And Stephanie, for our audience that doesn't know you yet, would you give a brief intro for them?
Yeah, so I am one of the early adopters of content marketing. We didn't call it content marketing then. We called it brand journalism. Somebody told me I was like the fourth managing editor of a brand. I was the managing editor of Dell. I helped Meredith Levien at the New York Times launch Paid Posts. I went off after that to launch, I became obsessed with sponsored content. So I launched Politico's content studio, ended up as the head of content at Visa, and most recently did a 5-year stint launching new content initiatives at Autodesk.
Incredible. Can you take us back, roughly what year was it at Dell that you were one of the first managing editors ever?
So this is 2012. I was a tech journalist at Fortune magazine. I dreamed of being a writer. I fully expected that I was going to have my entire career as a journalist, eventually an editor of some publication or other, maybe Fortune. And then, the disintermediation of media happened. And it was a few of us who quickly understood what that meant for brands. But I started to consult in an effort to figure this out. And so Dell soon became my biggest client. More than half my business was Dell, which is never a good idea if you're trying to keep your business flexible. But at a certain point, a switch flipped. And I stopped being excited by everything I could do consulting for Dell and became frustrated about everything I couldn't do because I wasn't in-house. And so I went to Kelly McGinnis, who was the head of comms. Now she is the chief communications officer of Levi's. I asked her to lunch and she saw me coming from a mile away. She knew what I was going to ask and she created a position for me. And there I was, the managing editor of that gigantic company. Yes.
Wild. What was the pitch exactly? What was the vision for what that would look like?
Yeah, I kind of almost said it, which is I think that that's the direction that we're going in. You need a storyteller for this brand. You need someone who is going to turn Dell into a publisher. That's how we were phrasing it at the time. You were going to be a brand publisher.
And then what kind of people would you hire? Like, who did you hire at Dell then? Because you couldn't just find a content marketer. No one had that on their resume.
And also, how big was Dell at this point? Just for context, sorry, I want to know, like, how big of a company was Dell at this point?
I think they were about 160,000, so they were smaller than they are now.
Okay.
Yes, and of course, I started out as an individual contributor because that's what was available. You know, being at Dell is how I found out. How would I know this? I was a journalist. You know, I found out that I actually love figuring out how to get things done at enormous matrixed organizations. It's the thing that most people hate.
Yeah.
I think it's a great puzzle to solve. It really gets me up in the morning trying to figure out how to connect with people. You know, I mean, at a place like Dell, it was like I was the mayor of a town and I was contacting other mayors of other towns and trying to make a deal about how we would bring our resources together and, you know, make mutually beneficial things happen. And that's how we launched Tech Page One. So Tech Page One was an early brand content site. We had the idea to take over the Solution Center homepage where customers were already coming to get information. But instead of giving them, you know, let's just go right to the pitch product information, we gave them thought leadership. And the conversions were, it was really impressive. You know, within a year, I think it was credited with $1 billion annually of influenced pipeline. So it was a very early example of what can be accomplished if you do thought leadership right. We also we got a lot of earned media out of it. Like we would break a story and then, you know, somebody else would, another publication would pick it up. And so since I was sitting in comms, that was certainly appreciated because that's a comms KPI.
Totally. Help them get some placements and mentions. We've got to take it back to this point about you actually enjoying, right? Breaking down the walls of the enterprise, right? Figuring out how to collaborate and get people to swim together or work with you. Why do you think people generally don't love that problem set? And you know, what about you really enjoys it?
So I do have a theory about this, which is that I was not raised, work-wise anyway, in corporate. I think my ignorance helped me. It didn't occur to me that this should be hard or, you know, I think that when you understand an organization a little too well, you are hyper aware of the sensitivities. And it's not that I was insensitive. I just wasn't worried that these queries I was making or these conversations I was asking for or the collaboration that I needed was something that I shouldn't expect. And so I think that at first I didn't realize I was doing it or that it should be hard. I'll tell you another thing. When I first spoke to Kelly McGinnis about this role, she said that she had 11 open recs and that I could have any of them. She would turn any of those originally scoped jobs into this job, but they were all too low. And so she said, you know, they are a bit too low. You could grow them or you could wait and I will, you know, get the role created that I want for you. But, you know, it doesn't always happen and, you know, it'll take a few months and everything. And I'm thrilled that I was such an idiot. I was so ignorant at the time because if you told me that today, I wouldn't take that bet. That's not a good bet to place. No. Yeah. And of course, the reason that people hate, you know, influencing across a matrix organization is that it's exhausting, it's thankless, and the answer is almost always no, at least at first. It gets to be one of those not yet.
There's probably some of the investigative journalist in you there as well, like just having a puzzle, not giving up, you know, when other people would stop calling, like keep trying to get an answer, get a piece of information. Yeah, I think I could see that.
Or unreasonable and stubborn. You know, there's a nice way to say it, and there's probably
no words.
If you're like most B2B content marketers, you want to lead the conversation in your industry. At Animals, we help B2B software companies do exactly that by creating standout, survey-driven, state-of-the-industry type reports that help you grow your brand authority, backlinks, and pipeline. In just 12 weeks, we run a process that helps uncover narratives from a unique data set packaged into a beautifully designed flagship content asset that your whole team is going to be proud of. Book a consult now at animals.co/whitepapers and find out how to set the new benchmark for your industry.
I kind of want to skip all the way to Autodesk. So you've built a large content team at Autodesk from scratch, right?
So no, I did not build. I mean, I built a decent sized team within the content team, but that's the reason that I was attracted to Autodesk. I actually took 2 steps back from Visa to take that role at Autodesk. The thing is that in my earlier era holding these roles, since I was launching the function itself, like at Visa, there's an appetite for it, or there was, and then there isn't. You get a different executive. I don't think I understood the import and necessity for an executive sponsor. Once in a while, I would lose an executive sponsor. They would move on, or somebody would get fired, or you kind of Peter Principle yourself out after a little while. Like there's only so many things that I can make up from whole cloth about how this should be done, and follow my peers like Tomas from afar and take lessons from what I heard or in our conversations, but had not experienced. And so when I saw that role at Autodesk, I knew a little bit about Dusty DiMercurio. I had seen him on a stage. He had seen me on a stage. So we were what you call a weak tie. You know how they say that you get roles through weak ties. And I thought, now here's my chance to see what a large content organization looks like, how it operates. So even back then, I mean, most recently, before the giant layoff, that was a team of 65 people, just on a content team.
What?
When I joined, I think it was 50. And so there was a whole, team devoted to planning and operations. There was a whole team devoted to content strategy. There was a whole team devoted to SEO, specifically for content pages. And that's how I ended up launching new initiatives, because they did have a brand content channel called Redshift. Now it's called Design and Make with Autodesk because it's all in the same theme. But I came in to provide new and more innovative content functions, which is what I always do, right? I always launch the thing that either hasn't happened in the discipline yet or that is new to that organization. In this case, for Autodesk, it was new to me. I had never done any account-based marketing myself. I was very curious about it because I think at the end of the day, most B2B, especially B2B SaaS marketing problems are buying committee problems, aren't they? Right? Mm-hmm. If you don't influence the whole buying committee and you're trying to get 7-figure, 8-figure deals, you can probably forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I launched that function. Then I launched an executive content function because Autodesk at the time did not really have content specifically for executives. Some of the content they made worked well for executives, but they didn't have their own channel. They didn't have a nice circle of goodness where you're sending some introductory content before an event, and then you attend the event, and then you create content from the event, and then you send it as an after the event email, and then you keep cultivating an increasingly harmonious and close relationship with executives who are all members of the buying committee and then who think of you as a trusted partner instead of this vendor, of course. And then in my interview, that initial interview with Dusty, I had this idea that if Autodesk wanted to be as well known as it should be, I knew it. But when I took that job, I was surprised to have people say, Autodesk? What's Autodesk? Because if you're at Dell, you'd completely know what Autodesk is. I thought I went to another big logo. I was the only one who didn't realize I hadn't done that. And so I said, I think you guys need an insights-based content program so that you're really providing that value to customers, like giving them something instead of continually asking them for something. And Dusty at the time said, funny you should mention it, because he felt that there was already an appetite for something like that. And so that was the most recent one that I launched. And now it's 3 years in. At that point, Autodesk had never done a truly integrated marketing campaign, let alone, they never had in 43 years, let alone one that was based on a content program. And it blasted through every record we ever had.
Nice. And that was the State of Design and Make
State
report,
of Design and
right?
Make. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Wow. Look at that. Content having a big influence on the way the marketing is done. You don't hear about that every day.
Well, they didn't, as you're saying, how do you break through the walls of an enterprise? It was a very siloed organization, as are typical enterprises. So there wasn't a single marketing budget to even draw from to do an integrated marketing campaign. So what they would do is, they would do, a brand campaign and a couple of teams would participate, but, sales and customer success wouldn't have a role. And in the regions, maybe they wouldn't even be participating. Maybe it would be US based, And so when we designed State of Design and Make, it was meant to touch every single marketing department at the whole company in all 3 geos. And if you design it that way from the inside out, but you can't do that unless you have one budget. And there was not one budget. And so here's how you break down the walls, right? You find something that can achieve each silo's KPIs that are unrelated to yours, maybe. But you elicit that information, and then you show them that if they can, join hands with you and give you some of their budget, then you can achieve their goals. It's a lot of trust to ask for, which is why it was not so much me, it was Dusty having these conversations, because he had been there for 10 or 12 years at that point, and he had all these relationships across the org that I didn't know these people. And so he was the one influencing, and all these organizations had some amount of budget to commission a study from Deloitte or commission a study from Forrester or Ipsos or, BCG to, get their name attached to something that they knew customers were already reading. And we said, if we combine those budgets, we're just talking about the business case for content, right? If we combine those budgets with a team of 2, we said we can do the work of 15 people at Ipsos.
That's crazy.
And we did. So all of that you see is a team of 2, which is kind of amazing.
We should share a link to the report in our notes. But yeah, there's a lot we know that goes into building that kind of thing, right? Designing the survey, getting it launched, doing the analysis, et cetera, et cetera. I just think it's so interesting that you were hired in to launch the new content initiatives. And I do find that there's a lot of gravity to just doing the same thing, maybe increasing volume, but the same kind of content again and again. And it's hard to find time to do the sub brand or the new category of. Mm-hmm. Do you think that kind of org design is necessary to in some cases to actually innovate in the content programs that a company is producing?
No, you don't need to have something. And my title wasn't new content initiatives. I'm just saying that that's what I did. We gave me a new, ever increasingly weirder title. My titles just got more, sprawling. And at one point I was global head of thought leadership report content and ABM. It just got, we thought of calling it, the innovation content team. But then it would insult people. Isn't my content team innovative? So we just never called it that. Yeah, no, of course not. What you mostly need is a partnership. You always need a partnership. Like I said, when I was alone at Dell or at Visa, in a certain sense, you only go so far. I've found it to be much more pleasing and fun to have one person who understands it with you. In the initial case of Autodesk, it was Dusty. And so having a partner like Dusty who knew what I could do, not just for him, but for Autodesk, and who gave me that affirmation and who fought some battles for me, I'm sure, that I didn't even see and that he probably will never tell me about, just as Kelly McGinnis did.
Yeah.
That makes it possible. But no, if you're that sort of a person, wherever I go, I'm going to launch new things. I can't help myself, But but so as long as you have that kind of a person, if they're passionate and excited and they have any decent understanding of how to showcase the business case, then they're going to do that for your team.
I see that. But still the importance of that executive sponsor.
Yeah.
It really is critical to doing that level of interesting content. Is that fair to say from your experience?
Yeah. Well, that has been my experience is that there has to be either institutional will or a powerful person's will. It's so funny because when Kelly McGinnis created that role for me at Dell, I thought I was just killing it. I was so sure. I launched Tech Page One and all these leaders came to this summit that I hosted in Round Rock, and they came from all over the world to spend a day with me, talking about what this could be. And same thing where you had to ask them to, join hands on launching this thing. And then I think she went directly to Levi's. So then she's hired by Levi's, and it was like somebody snatched a warm blanket off of me. And then I understood that I was in the cold, and I had not been in the cold because Kelly and people like her, she's so humble. She would never, ever, like, she's one of those people who makes others think that you did it, but we would have this monthly one-to-one, and she only ever asked me one question: how can I get out of your way? That was her question. And I'd say, well, I can't seem to get a meeting with so-and-so, and I really have to talk to and I didn't even put it all together. The next thing that would happen is I'd get that meeting, or the next thing that would happen is I would get that agreement. And so that's what made me leave Dell. I didn't get booted out of Dell or anything. I just realized that, at the time I was the only remote person on that team, the only one. I was in San Francisco. That was not a thing in 2015 at the time that I left. And I thought, oh, wow, I don't have Kelly anymore. And, we're off to the races, and I want a career path, and I'm going to have to be local. And so that's when I started to look for an opportunity that was in the Bay Area. So, of course, I ended up, commuting to DC for almost a year to launch Politicos. But that was while I was looking for this place to land. Peter Chiricuri, who was the executive VP of sales, asked me to do this for Politico. So I came there for a while, and then I ended up at Visa.
Do you think you have, Stephanie, like a common thread between these content initiatives, these content brands that you've shipped over the years? I mean, you've got Visa's Cashless Cities, right? If I understand it correctly. You've got the Page One initiative, the data report. Like, is there anything that connects these? Or like maybe a different question is, where do these creative sparks come from for you?
I think it all goes back to having started as a journalist. There's another wave happening right now of leaders of CNET, joining brands and things like that. When we were talking to comms about launching State of Design and Make at Autodesk, there was the key guy that I was speaking to at the time pressed me hard on not having earned media KPIs for the report. He said, Stephanie, I don't think you understand. Like, these brand studies are a dime a dozen. You should not go around having this as one of our leading indicators of success, because it won't work. And I said, I want to be held to that standard. Let me be held to that standard. What is required is quality, almost to the point where you become, which is really bad, a gatekeeper at an organization. So I'm always saying to my teams, we have to stay enablers. We must stay enablers. We cannot become gatekeepers. When you become gatekeeper, that's always when you lose your, the warm fuzzies between you and your organization, if not get laid off. But there is a point where you do have to die on hills, because if there's any, customers can smell it. It's like, bees and dogs can smell fear, and so can customers. And so if you game a brand study, that's why brand studies are a dime a dozen. If you game the results in the slightest, if they can tell that you're hiding something for your ends, they will avoid it, and then you won't get any press. But we succeeded in not doing that. And so year one, I think we got like 11 hits in the first 6 weeks. Year three, we got 97, which is like 897% growth or something like that. And I'm really proud of that. And that is because we did it right. We did it the way a research firm would have done it if we had outsourced it to them.
I want to hit on this point you made around gatekeepers versus enablers.
The bane of my existence. Yes.
Yeah, and what that looks like as a content organization. How do you see the difference? What are things that a content leader can do to shift out of like being a gatekeeper into helping other people? I assume you're talking about helping other teams produce content that's in the voice, that can help move the needle without blowing it.
Well, it's also that, when you're doing these things in a large enterprise, as we've observed, you're probably doing it through tiger teams. And so you're on these tiger team meetings on the regular, and somebody wants something from this shared project, and it may compromise the quality. You end up saying, no, now you're a gatekeeper. It's more like that cliche about how you have to find your way to yes. It's really hard to do. And it starts out easy because the whole thing is yeses. And then there just comes a day when everybody puts their shoulders down, and now they get it, they know how to deploy it, and now they want to use it for something that will degrade the quality. Or you get a negative data set. And now what are you going to do? Are you going to publish a study that says that investment by leaders is down this year when all you want in life as an organization is to have greater investment in a time of great uncertainty? Ouch. You end up having to make some pretty tough decisions, and not everybody likes those decisions. And now you're a gatekeeper. So, it's a daily conversation. How do we stay enablers? But, the way to do it is to figure out, they may be asking for X. And so you're hearing X and saying X is not possible. What you really have to think about is, what is the real goal? Is somebody breathing down their neck? Are they afraid they're going to lose their job? Are they in danger of missing a goal? Maybe you can give them what they need without giving them a thing they requested. And since a lot of people on my teams have been reactive types, they're very, very smart, and sometimes they're high strung, and easy to react. And so a lot of my conversations kind of sound like therapy sessions, because I'm always like, listen, breathe in and out. Do not react in the moment. Allow yourself to say, let me give it some thought, or let me talk to the rest of the team, or do not react in that moment. And by the way, I have to relearn this myself roughly every month. So I'll never be an expert. I'll always be a learner.
We got to make the switch to AI, Stephanie, because I want to hear your thoughts about AI. You talked about it at the beginning of the conversation, and I guess starting with how has your team been using it? Yeah, how do you keep the quality up? What's been good use cases for you? What have been things that haven't worked?
God, right off the bat, we were having the most interesting problems. So, for example, a frequent use case for any content creator for AI is, yay, I never have to localize a piece of content again. Isn't that wonderful? We do not. Autodesk does not localize its own content, in-house. We have a provider. And the provider uses AI. They do one pass with AI, and then they have a human editor looking over it. They have a number of phrases and keywords that ensure that in Korean or Japanese or Chinese or whatever, they're using the right term for this thing in construction. Or, these are very specialized industries. If you don't talk like an insider, you lose the attention of this customer, right? And so we go through all of this, and routinely we send a report from State of Design Make, for example, to our ABM team in China to share. And they say, I can't share this, or Japan, I can't share this. This is terrible. And they react really emotionally because they're imagining an executive reading this thing that they've looked forward to getting, because by now people are starting to anticipate, especially executives. Are we going to get this again this year? They say in their meetings with our CEO, Andrew Adingnos. That's how desirable these content pieces are.
That's great. Look at you.
That's nice, yeah.
Right? And so I don't know what to tell you, because even the simplest thing, I think localization would be on the list of low-hanging fruit, right? Very high on that list. Not there yet. So, and then, that undermines our relationship with Chinese colleagues or Japanese colleagues, because then they can't put their shoulders down and rely on what you're sending. Sometimes they want to review every word themselves. It can take weeks and delay a launch. It's a big problem. So that's number one problem, is that the things that I would think are easiest to adopt have not yet worked. The other problem that I didn't expect is, these our companies are all asking content creators to adopt AI quickly and well.
Yeah.
But we don't have vendors. So the bigger the organization, the longer the process of getting vendor approved by procurement, sourcing. And so, there was a point where our CMO was talking about our path towards AI and that we should be running pilots and things like that. I was leading these pilots some of the pilots she was talking about. And I just ended up slacking her. And I'm like, hey, can you poke procurement? Because we can't use this vendor. They gave us the project and we accepted it, 11 weeks ago, and we're still waiting to get started. And I don't know if she fully realized that she was going to have to unblock all of us in that regard. So that's thing number two. And then related to thing number two is, the tool race. Is that almost every day we're hearing about another tool, and it's way cooler than the tool you use. It's way cooler. Like everybody's got, Autodesk GPT or Visa GPT, or like everybody's got their white labeled in-house LLM. I am hearing about something cool every single day. Yesterday, I saw a bunch of stuff from Delphi. Have you seen that? See, I feel I'm filled with self-esteem right now that I actually saw something that you guys haven't heard yet. It's a startup. I don't know how big, that is asking you to upload all of your expertise so that they can use you as a virtual coach. In other words, kind of like Black Mirror, honestly. It sounds like super Black Mirror to me. But
so that means like Stephanie could coach her team or other content marketers or whomever.
Yeah, like to my understanding. So like I just saw this, in the last few hours and I'm trying to understand it. It seems like they're saying, like Robert Rose would be a better example. So Robert Rose has a content consultancy. He could, but why would he do that? See, that's the thing that I'm really... Yeah, so theoretically, he could upload all of his articles and, all of his pitch decks and the examples of strategies that he's given to all of these Fortune 500 or 1,000 companies, and then create a virtual Robert Rose coach who could help you too, to use his expertise. Yeah. And would he make the money? Would they? So now I'm diving into this thing. But like, if we're hearing about new tools every week, if not every day, then you can imagine what a challenge it is for an organization to keep up and to, empower their people to use the latest and most effective tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear it to everybody I talk to, like everybody has a headache or just like a burnout or wants to tap out. But I want to go back to the first point you made, because I'm curious about the translation, right? And essentially the quality problem. So what is your answer to that? Like, do you then not use it? Or like, how do you go from there? And if you know this problem is there, do you then ban the team from using AI? Or what have you done to solve that problem?
No, it's like what they say about weather in New Hampshire, just wait and it'll change. I think that we just have to hold our breaths, and then the tools they're improving really, really fast. I know people, who are more senior in their careers who have said to me, oh God, Stephanie, I tried GBT a few months ago. It hallucinated, a wild amount, and I'll never do it again. I'm like, dude, you got to stay in it every day. Because it's changing every day. It's getting better every day. And of course, they're having releases, what are they on, 4 or something like that. And so as the tool gets smarter, these problems will be solved. But until we see that quality coming out consistently, we can't just push the button, localize something, even if it's a vendor providing it, and assume that our colleagues in Japan will feel that it's, deploy ready.
Yeah, it's just so tempting to push the button, right? It feels like because it feels like content, when you push the button.
Yeah, and it's so awful when I can't tell. Like, if you give it to me in French, I could tell if it's awful, but that's it. That's the limit of my education. Yeah. So we have to take their word for it, and that's the other frustrating thing. Like, how bad is it? Are they being, very perfectionistic? Is it necessary to be that perfectionist? I think it is. I think they're telling us exactly what we should hear, because when so the executives for State of Design Week, I'm glad I got this out for some other reason yesterday. They like this as a book, right?
Look at that. Yeah, of course. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
we like books. Too. We love books.
I hate to kill trees for this thing, but they love having it as a book. And some of the executives will pass the book because they don't have enough around to their executive team, and there are all these Post-its or dog-eared pages or notes in it or something. But nice. if there were even, one lousy sentence in this thing, one typo even, I would have a little, I would have a physical reaction to it. So I get it. It. But they're talking about something that's more than that. They're talking about using the wrong phrases or, sometimes disrespecting executives by not using the proper title. The title didn't translate to what they're expecting, and that's a diss, and you can't be doing that.
Yeah, I think, but this is my tangent then. But like, I think we're all kind of like, it's lulling us into sleep. Is that the right word to say it? They have this phenomenon they studied with pilots, right? Because a lot of pilots, like 90% of the flight, they don't have to do anything. And but then when something happens, they're actually not ready because they're 90% of the time they're not doing anything. And I think it's a little bit like that, what we have to watch out for, I think. It's like, because if you automate 90% of the process, then the 10% where you have to pay attention, it's actually harder to pay attention because the rest of the time you don't have to pay attention anymore. And I think that's like, it's not always bad will, I think. I think we're less training our It's like your GPS in the car. It's like before, I think more people could find their way just with a map or based on their senses. But if you use Google Maps all the time, if somebody just can't find your way anymore because you never use that capability anymore. And I think that's the danger. I mean, that's what we need to figure out. Like, how do we keep our attention and our skill in the moments where it matters?
Yeah. I think that the greater danger will be when agentic AI is really a daily part of our lives and we're trusting agents to make decisions. And, who programmed the agent to make a certain decision? I was at this day recently, this CISO day related to the RSA conference in San Francisco. And I listened in on their sessions all day long. It was a privilege. And the worries that they articulated would freeze your blood. CISOs have to worry about some very, very consequential mistakes with security and the things that they were worrying about. And I'll tell you a secret, which is that all of us, this AI discussion always goes to the discussion of, how long do we get to stay employed? I would not have thought this. I would not for a moment have guessed. But CISOs are afraid of keeping their jobs too. I think their jobs just became 10 times more important. But like the rest of us, they're worried. And it's funny because I feel like I've been through this already, and my peers have all been through this already, because I lost my original career. I was very excited to be a journalist. I was one of those kids who was telling people when they were 8, that I was going to be a writer. And to watch my career go kablooey, like the whole discipline, was utterly heartbreaking. And I used to talk about that on stages quite a bit because, now we take it on faith, but journalists transitioning to corporate, it did not go well most of the time when it was early because of that heartbreak. Nobody succeeds by doing something that they do through gritted teeth. And so I think we have to think about that right now because, this technology will help us. We know that. It may hurt us, but one thing we can depend upon is the level of change. And one thing we can predict is that level of change will happen much, much faster than it did with the advent of digital. And so we just have to, that's why I would stay in it every day, because that's how fast it's happening. And we don't have a choice.
Well, there's something reassuring sitting here chatting with you, knowing that you went through a similar, big career shift or market shift, whatever you want to call that. And look at you now, right? And so I'm hopeful that the audience here for Animals and the folks, the three of us in this room can stay in it every day, right? And stay relaxed enough to kind of figure this out, whatever comes next. So I think we should wrap here. Stephanie, thanks so much for your time. It was a privilege to get to dig into the archives a little bit, hear about where you think things are going. And I'm sure our audience is going to follow along with you wherever you head next. Speaking of which, where can folks stay in touch with you? Where would you point them to, see what you're up to?
Just for now, grab me on LinkedIn and I'll tell you where I'm landing as soon as I'm allowed. Yes.
Lovely.
Oh, exciting.
What I would say to people listening right now is we'll get through it together. We will. It'll be okay because we'll all do it at the same time. It'll be all right. Thank you so
100%.
much for having me. It was a pleasure.
That was an inspiring conversation.
What a journey. Yeah, it's just that. Yeah, it's a bit different from the normal kind of enterprise episodes we've had. I felt it was nice to kind of get her personal parts of her personal journey. I think that was awesome.
Yes, definitely. I'm inspired about all the different content initiatives she got to launch. Usually you get one or two of those, every couple jobs. I mean, at the scale that she's done, especially. But it's that's the repeat thing, it seems, coming in and I'm sure she's running a lot of regular content we didn't even talk a lot about. But, on top of that, some really cool projects.
No, exactly. I mean, we talked mostly about the cool project. We didn't get to talk about the nuts and bolts, a little glimpses we saw of it, right? But that's the thing. It's there must be so much else going on with running teams of that size. She just touched on a little bit with the AI, with the localization, but there's so much more of that. To me, maybe that's my side of what I like. That's always the dream, these kind of, I love these ideas of these kind of branded publication, media style content marketing plays. And it's not a coincidence. Like, it's clear that she's really good at that, right? And that's why then also people, it goes a bit back and forth. It's like she launched some of those and then people know her for that and then they ask her for that and then you get to do that. So that's also cool, but she's clearly also good at it.
The thing that struck me the most chatting with Stephanie is like the level of ease at which navigating the enterprise seems to come to her.
Yeah.
You know, she mentioned that like success doesn't come from like, you know, through gritted teeth. I think that was a pretty close quote of a one-liner she said. The violent part of that metaphor that we're using almost seems like it's not resonant with her. She gets it. Like she knows that people feel that way about collaborating in the political games and like, you know, getting resources for what you want to do, et cetera, et cetera. But for her, it just seemed like she approaches that with ease, you know? She just seems to be someone that's like good at making connections and like working through things. And therefore, there aren't big walls that need to be broken down for her. She's just kind of like, you know, moving fluidly amongst different areas in the enterprise in order to achieve what she needs to achieve.
I think the strange thing is that if she was a journalist before, then you're not necessarily a manager, right? But then on the other hand, I do really think if you're a good journalist, you need to have some of that, like, I don't care to pick up the phone like 100 times and call people that I don't know. And if they give me a no, I keep asking. Like I think there is maybe a characteristic there that in a strange way kind of makes sense, like to fight your way through a bureaucracy and just like keep going, right? And don't get demotivated if you had like 10 no's or you run into 10 walls. So yeah, I mean, you wouldn't expect, and I don't think every journalist necessarily has that, but she clearly does, which is kind of cool and surprising to see.
One other thing that could be true here. Here's a thesis we didn't try on with her. You know the feeling, Tim, of like when you have a content idea that's just a bullseye. You know, like you believe it in your bones that this is a good thing that like, you know, some segment of the world needs and it's going to help pull the business forwards. And you're kind of just like putting in that extra effort, whether that be to edit it one more time or to promote it even further or to sell someone else in the idea. Like that comes easy to you, you know? So here's my thesis.
Yeah.
If the content idea, if it's so solid, you know, that she believes it's going to work, maybe the rest comes with ease. So maybe it's about like having that great idea, that great concept.
Yeah.
And letting like the energy follow.
Yeah. And and I think also she clearly wants to hold herself to a high standard, right? She also mentioned a manager, I think, who's or higher up, who said like, you know, don't let yourself be measured on, was it earned media, I think? And then she was like, no, I want that because that forces me to, like, I think most people would say like, okay, then I'm not going to put that target for myself, right? But then she's like, no, I want that because I want to be held to that standard. But then again, the way she talks about it, it's very easy and calm and no frustration or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's a powerful leader, right? And I think to succeed in the enterprise, sometimes that's what's asked of folk, right? Like so much of content leadership is leadership. It's been a privilege getting to kind of be led by these individual folks and learn from them throughout the season so far.
Great. Anything else?
No, I mean, that's my easy segue into so stay tuned for the next few episodes where we'll continue to bring on some excellent leaders and awesome brands that are doing interesting stuff, right? And hopefully you're picking up some lessons along the way as to how they're building those teams and you know, driving some of their successes.
Yeah, absolutely. We have some other really nice leaders coming up, so I'm excited for the next ones.
Let's go. Stay tuned.